just had to sniff through so much that you learn how to see what's fake and what's built to just be good on the surface, that a lot of the luxury brands of today are pretty hollow underneath. Unfortunately, Bitcoin is super tied with politics right now, which I think a lot of Bitcoiners are just a little triggered by. And my biggest hope for politics as a Bitcoiner is that I have a hard choice in 4 years. And so it's a harder thing to get companies that are profitable, but in the early stages to really hold Bitcoin. If you expect them to give you a discount for spending Bitcoin, I think it's a little bit harder of a proposition. Bitcoiners and companies are kind of just learning. We're just stepping into that role in the world where we have enough money, we have enough of like a large cohort of people, and we're going to win. Like, we're not going to go away at this point.
Hi Ben, how are you doing? Thanks again for thanks for being again on the podcast.
Yeah, great to see you, Robin. It's cool to come back a year later and see you've been crushing it and still going hard, and it's fun to catch up.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just getting started. I'm always saying, but it has been a wild year. I think it's about 1 year since we last recorded, probably a little bit more than that. What has happened in Bitcoin, which was really interesting for you? Like, what is kind of your highlight that has been happening in the last year for you?
I think it's kind of just like a little bit more of acceptance of kind of realization that this is here to stay and not being attacked. I first got into Bitcoin at the top of the last cycle. And in writing it down all the way, I continuously, tried to tell people about it, and going through my craziness of trying to get people into Bitcoin. It was always Bitcoin will get shut down by the government. Cool. Like, don't need to care about it, can write it off. And during that time as well, the Biden administration was coming at Bitcoin companies and crypto companies pretty aggressively from the banking angle. And so I think the biggest thing for me is that is just, seemingly laid to rest now. I can't say completely, but you just got to think that in 4 years, Bitcoin is in such a different spot that whatever the next administration does can't really be aggressively curtailing Bitcoin companies or Bitcoiners, just because it's so much more integrated into society, into businesses, and into their well-being and their competitors' well-being, that not that I ever thought Bitcoin was going to get shut down by the government, but it's more just like for the first 3 or 4 years of being into it, I fully expected to be labeled a criminal or have what I do blackballed by the government at some point. And it's pretty crazy for me to feel like that's no longer really on the table, at least in a meaningful percentage chance.
That's super. It kind of got more and more obvious. I just talked about that early Bitcoiners are kind of lucky to even had the chance of seeing Bitcoin, but that luck gets less and less and less, because now it's like, if you see Bitcoin and you see that presidents are talking about it, big company leaders are talking about it, you have to be that curious that you actually look at it. So now it gets less and less luck. It's more of like, now it's your fault if you don't get it and if you don't research it. Where to the point where Bitcoin is really kind of almost an obvious trade that you are doing now, even if you don't get the revolutionary sound money aspect of it, at least you should know this might be a thing. So it might be a good idea to have something of that in your portfolio. And if we just get that, we already won, because then the rabbit hole goes. If you have a little bit of Bitcoin, it just keeps increasing for people.
Yeah, I think the lift to just going from zero to a tiny bit is much lower. The lift to understanding Bitcoin is still huge. Anytime I'm trying to explain it, it's like, well, if you don't have all these foundations for all these economic principles, like, it's maybe hard for me to explain. Maybe I'm also just not the right person, and everyone kind of needs their correct angle to get at it from. But there's a reason we all went down the Bitcoin rabbit hole. Some of it's curiosity, some of it's necessity. And I think that lift is still hard while there's more resources. But yeah, the lift to get from 0 to 1 and then to have that incentive to have you keep going is much easier. And also one of the reasons to just look it off is relatively gone. So my fear is that it's going to be looked at within the divisive climate of United States politics, where I grew up pretty left-leaning, and not trying to get deep into politics here, but grew up pretty left-leaning, and through college pretty left-leaning, and therefore most of my friends are pretty left-leaning. And I'm just saying I'm exposed to that side, and am relatively mindful, at least, that Bitcoin will be lumped into a Trump thing and therefore attacked by half of the populace, or seen as an enemy, just been being linked to him. And so while I see it, any president adopting it as a positive thing, just the downside of it being lumped into political culture in the United States is definitely still there. And I hope that my friends on the left don't let that stop them from a pretty neutral political technology.
Yeah, it's the threat of it being a political thing. But there's a good amount of voters in America that are Bitcoiners and that are voting Democrat. Even in the last election, even though Trump was a big on a Bitcoin conference, a big Bitcoin proponent, because I did some videos with Trump supporters, with like people saying that's kind of the obvious Bitcoin choice, and I got so many comments saying like, "Oh, like how can you vote for him? I'm a Bitcoiner. I vote for Harris." Like, I think we focus on the big messages and we focus like, okay, Bitcoin Trump, but I think there are a lot is such a vague term, but there's definitely a good group of people that voted for Harris, even though they are Bitcoiners. Like that's a thing. There's even like Bitcoin for Harris groups that tried to raise funds. I even had I forgot his name, sorry, but I had someone from them on my show. So there's a big group also being on the left side. I even have friends that are completely left, really in the green field, all in Bitcoin, because they also get the Bitcoin thing. They just have a different political mindset of where they want to go. But I think mostly Bitcoiners voted Trump, I think, last time. But they just wanted to say, like, I think maybe it's just the public perception on Twitter that it's a little bit more extreme than it actually is.
For sure. And Twitter's somewhat self-selecting since Elon took over. And I mean, my biggest, unfortunately, Bitcoin is super tied with politics right now, which I think a lot of Bitcoiners are just a little triggered by. And my biggest hope for politics as a Bitcoiner is that I have a hard choice in 4 years. And that's kind of the best I can hope for. That said, I think that there's a ton of room for just the grassroots Bitcoinization of the world growing. And we see, I think politics, while definitely we hope is a will of the people, it's a bit of a top-down approach to Bitcoin adoption. And it's nice to have that top cover that you're not going to get arrested for holding Bitcoin or starting a company in Bitcoin. But I think there's a lot to be seen in the growth from the bottom up of Bitcoin adoption throughout the world. And one of the parallels I see as super important right now is from politics to economics is the Bitcoin/crypto lobby or cohort of people is talked about a lot as swinging this election, especially monetarily with donations. But I think people were a huge part of that. And I am starting to really focus on trying to build out well, that's maybe a strong way of saying it, but I think that the Bitcoin cohort of consumers is also going to be something that grows with time and becomes extremely important, hopefully in the next few years or now, depending on the business, depending on what you offer, and depending on your size. Bitcoiners can have a meaningful role in both bringing that company maybe towards Bitcoin a little bit more and influencing which companies really thrive and survive as the cohort of people grows and as our purchasing power continues to grow. I think Bitcoin companies, especially smaller ones right now, and I'm not talking about companies in the S&P 500 adopting Bitcoin as a treasury reserve asset. I'm saying Bitcoin companies that accept Bitcoin, companies that are comfortable with Bitcoin, and companies that make products that Bitcoiners want. So high quality, lasting, and built with some form of integrity. I think those companies are the really interesting ones to watch right now, because Bitcoiners can actually have a meaningful say in what's being produced, which companies succeed by just the little thing of a company maybe accepting Bitcoin or just being curious about it and learning. And maybe this is a little bit less like the corner store down the street, and I'm talking like high quality products being made that Bitcoiners are specifically interested in. Is just an interesting spot for the world right now.
It's super interesting to think about that, or the power of Bitcoiners. First of all, like in the last election, what we've seen that Bitcoin is already such a relevant voting bloc that the president feels like, okay, he has to go to a Bitcoin conference. But then also within companies, they're getting more and more influential, and getting also more and more influential in life in general, in the world positions. How do you think the world changes when Bitcoiners are getting more in control of huge amount of resources? If they hold on to Bitcoin and Bitcoin is going where it goes, Bitcoiners will be the elite, will be those people that control huge amount of resources.
So Bitcoiners will be everyone, but I think that Bitcoin instills a bit of different incentives to the way you spend money and the way you approach things. And also there is the cohort of relatively early adopters that are in it for the revolution as opposed to just saving money. So it's a bit of a broad term to be saying, but I think in general, Bitcoiners are looking for a product that is built to last and with integrity. And the difference between that and what people who have money now maybe are spending in general is, I think people now are spending money on things that are meant to be a bit more flashy, meant to show like, hey, this is wealth. I'm rich. I bought this thing that's flashy. Maybe I just replace it all the time and get new stuff. Sure, you're buying quality, but I think that the show is more important than how long it actually lasts, because you don't want to be seen with old stuff if you're super wealthy now, I believe. Bitcoiners, on the other hand, are kind of can sniff out that bullshit pretty easily, I find. I mean, especially if you're like hardcore Bitcoiner at this stage in the game, you've had to wade through so much crap to be able to get to this place, whether it be altcoins or just fiat fuckery, to say, excuse my French, but I don't know, there's another way to say it. You just had to sniff through so much that you learn how to see what's fake and what's built to just be good on the surface, that a lot of the luxury brands of today are pretty hollow underneath. So as an American, you look for generally things that are made by America, because that's something that has been hollowed out in our world. We really want, like, Americans, I think, want to support American made because it's just something that we lost as the global reserve currency. We lost the ability to produce things, and that's something that we find pride in supporting and building back, because that's the history of America. That's the time period of America that we see as like the most strong, the most patriotic, is the time when Americans made things. So figuring out companies that do that, companies that just make super high quality products, companies that make things that are legitimately good for you in the long run, And those that are just honest, don't lie. And if they're on the same mission for you as well, I think that's a super valuable thing. So I think the thing people point towards is Black Rifle Coffee Co., which is like a super right-wing coffee company. But coffee's kind of a commodity in the grand scheme of things. I mean, sure, you can like different roasts, but ultimately, like, coffee is a pretty commoditized product. So that's just saying, like, people buy this coffee because it supports the mission that they're on. Bitcoiners can have the same thing, where if you just show that you're on the mission and you're not doing this in a hollow way, you're legitimately here, I think Bitcoiners support. But in addition to that, it's also high quality goods built to last that are made with integrity.
Yeah, I think this circular economy of like Bitcoiners want to support other Bitcoiners and want to also spend the Bitcoin and kind of bring this whole circular economy, this, I don't know, digital citadels building, it is a huge part of what I find Bitcoiners are really fascinated with. And I like that. I do get Bitcoin income. I do pay one of my post-production members in Bitcoin. So there's like a circular economy going on there where free parties. I get the money in Bitcoin, I give it away in Bitcoin again. And this is already a small circular economy. And if we build more and more of those Bitcoin things where there is high quality and it's based and denominated also in Bitcoin, that's like living in the future right now. that actually feels amazing. How has it been for you in your company with wine and the connection with Bitcoin?
So I think I've felt this much more than most companies are set up to feel. Just because I am small, it's really just me with a few other people that I hire for specific tasks, and also because I am full on a Bitcoiner, like all in. This is all that matters, and it sucked me in from a legitimate passion perspective. So the businesses that I'm talking about, I don't think they need to get to this point. I don't think they need to become full on Bitcoiners to experience the benefits of Bitcoiners being a customer base. I think they will, and I think that's just where incentives go once you kind of get that first little bit of Bitcoin, like we were talking about earlier. The barrier is a lot smaller to get there. But I think that their orange pilling journey is a little bit less like, yeah, sure, number go up, but also I need money to reinvest into my business constantly. And it's tricky to get them from that 0 to 1. Like, I need to hold Bitcoin. Bitcoin's kind of taking profits, so I'm not continuously on this treadmill of buy more product, sell it. My cost goes up, raise the price, buy more product, sell it. It's a treadmill that just never stops. And so you slowly start getting off when you start getting Bitcoin, and you need that high quality product to be able to attract Bitcoin. I am at a spot where, like, I started out winemaking and knew that I wanted to start a business, kind of just went for it and taught myself how to make wine, taught myself how to run a business. And the path to, like, the business path that I wanted to run was initially like start farmers markets and then probably open up a tasting room like the 5 to 10 other wineries in my hometown and just grow like they do. But what joining the Bitcoin community has given me is, like, now I don't need to just limit myself to this tiny quarter of Colorado. I have this entire community of people all around the United States that are supportive of a Bitcoin company that makes high quality wine with good ingredients, just grapes. So I check all the boxes for who would want to spend, like, for a Bitcoiner wanting to spend money at a specific company. I'm a Bitcoiner, obviously accept Bitcoin, make a high quality product. And that's the baseline. That's a great spot to be. But because I'm so all in, I've been able to make that really the entirety of my business and not have to limit myself and just really be completely expansive. So I think that will change as more competition in the wine industry comes in. I will probably have to be a bit more localized, but there's room for all these other businesses to tap into that because there are so many industries that you're the first, and you can get massive market share as a small business when it comes to Bitcoiners. And it's really just like, if you're not quite there, it's really hard to see how crazy, passionate, and driven Bitcoiners are, both to spread Bitcoin and to support people that are on their same mission, and their drive for just high quality products. And so it's kind of like, I'm trying to just tell people like what happened to me and say, like, you can just test this out, see if it works. And hopefully Bitcoiners are aware that of the power they have as a consumer. I think it's a little hard because you're always like, until you're maybe, 10 years into Bitcoin, like you're always like, man, I can really stack more. I don't want to spend a ton of money. I'm not always, you feel the dips a little bit more. But I think at a certain point, you kind of just reach a spot where you're like, look, I support this mission. I want to live on Bitcoin only. And the only way to do that is to support companies that further myself towards that mission, that allow me to buy all the things I need in life with Bitcoin. And at a certain, you're just not like really getting closer to the mission if you're not spending your money, voting with your money. And so I think Bitcoiners are waking up to that. I think that there's a big enough cohort of us that we can kind of be a bit of a snowball effect. I know everyone makes different economic choices, but I think there are these things that guide general spending money for Bitcoiners. And we're just beginning to realize our power.
It's an interesting thought, because the market goes where the purchasing power goes, and purchasing power goes more and more into Bitcoiners' hand. So that's a really interesting thing. It's also, right now, you can actually market yourself as a Bitcoin company, but at some point it will look probably ridiculous. Like, like totally. Everyone has Bitcoin, and then like Bitcoin will be a boring thing. This will be fun to see how long this effect lasts of branding something with Bitcoin, and it has a pull effect, because at some point, like, of course, you're a Bitcoin company, like every company is like, you save your money in Bitcoin, like you accept Bitcoin, like that. At some point, this will be a normal thing. Will be fun to see those transition times. But I think like for the next 5 to 10 years, companies will have a major advantage if they position themselves as a Bitcoin company, not only marketing wise, but just from a balance sheet perspective. Like the advantage is very obvious. If a big company, or like even a small mid-sized company, is just going there like, hey, let's convert, I don't know, 20% of our cash reserves into Bitcoin. What speaks against that? It seems so obvious, especially if you really say like, okay, I want to preserve my company for a long term. I think Seyr said it actually on my podcast even, of like, if you want to make your company immortal and make it live forever, switch to a Bitcoin standard, because there's a good chance that the increase of purchasing power might outlive all your expenses in the future, even if your business is going through a rough patch. And I think Bitcoin can do so much for companies. It's so overlooked, and I'm just boggled by how few companies actually do that.
Right. And I think what you're getting at is totally no brainer. If you have a big stack of cash reserves, you probably should have some Bitcoin. But what I'm getting at is there's a lot of companies, and I would probably say the majority of companies around the world don't have big cash reserves. They're either growing and just trying to reinvest everything back into their business, or they're dying and need to get a leg up. And so these companies, I think, would be well off in positioning themselves from a marketing perspective towards Bitcoiners, because you can, I don't know the history of like Gucci or anything, but it was probably a super high quality producer that started from nothing and grew themselves up by pitching themselves to the future financial elite, or the financial elite at the time. And I think there's this spot for any company that makes a super high quality product to then position themselves towards Bitcoiners and all of a sudden become the product of the future financial elite, the thing that Bitcoiners get after. And if Bitcoiners are going to have all the money, that is the ideal person to go after for future. So if companies now see that Bitcoiners are the future people to go after, they start making products that Bitcoiners want. And we're a bit, amorphous. We're all different. People from all walks of life. People who believe very different things, as we were saying earlier. But I think there's these core standards of quality and integrity that if you have those and you say we're on that same mission, I think that goes a long ways. And Bitcoiners are kind of just, like I said, Bitcoiners and companies are kind of just learning. We're just stepping into that role in the world where we have enough money, we have enough of like a large cohort of people, and we're going to win. Like, we're not going to go away at this point. So it's this barrier to entry to making products for Bitcoiners. Yes, saving your money in Bitcoin, that's a no-brainer. But I think there's this slightly different angle that we hear these big investors, and like, it's interesting, man. I'm super into like, yeah, why isn't Apple buying Bitcoin with their massive cash reserves instead of just they're buying their stock back? That's super interesting, but I think the meaningful change comes from the ground up and businesses realizing that Bitcoiners as people are the customer base that they should be targeting. And it's smaller, so smaller companies are going to feel it a little bit more, but that grows up and eventually you're making products for the financial elite of the world, people who have power. And that's kind of that's just an opportunity that's pretty crazy to pass up.
Why do you think, why do you think more companies aren't looking into this, like on doing Bitcoiner things, rather like it can be putting on a balance sheet, it can be for their customers, it can be marketing, it can be accepting, like you can do so many Bitcoin things as you just laid out. Why do you think more companies aren't looking into this?
Well, it's kind of twofold. Is one, I think Bitcoiners are just coming into their own. So there's only really small businesses like mine and maybe a few other hardcore Bitcoiners businesses that have benefited from this. So you kind of need this one bigger, more, not huge, but like more known company to really show the way for a lot of people. And also it requires an understanding of Bitcoin to understand Bitcoiners and where things are headed. So you need to be a little bit, at least if you're not having your hand held in the Bitcoin world, which most people aren't, it's a little crazy to dive in this and a little crazy. I mean, maybe you just say YOLO and buy a little bit, but you're not going to start marketing as it. It's rare that a company would actually just start accepting Bitcoin because Bitcoiners start asking for it. And if they do, they're probably going to say, we're going to accept crypto because we're free market. We want to accept everything. But what I found is that you actually hurt yourself when you accept crypto when it comes to brand loyalty and trying to market to Bitcoiners, because it's not that, like, I think we as Bitcoiners, we understand, like, yeah, sure, you want to accept everything from a business. You want to accept, as a business, you want to accept any form of payment. You want to give me money for my product? Done. But what we're looking for is as Bitcoiners, speaking from a Bitcoiner's perspective, we're looking for the value. Why are you accepting Bitcoin? Why should I give you my Bitcoin? Or why should I give you my dollars just because you accept Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies? And I think what businesses find is there's very few people, maybe Monero excluded, who want to spend shitcoins, because they buy those things to make a ton of money. The smart ones buy those things to try and make a ton of money to buy Bitcoin. And no one's really looking to scale those as payment methods. Whereas Bitcoiners, they want to save it. And if you want to save it and spend it in the future, you probably, like, it's a bit of a fail-safe to invest in spending it right now, to invest in the economy, to get people to accept it right now. It's a bit of an insurance policy on your future Bitcoin value. And so I think businesses, they kind of like, yeah, I want to accept everything. But if they can have someone explain this, that maybe they go down the rabbit hole themselves. It's a slow barrier. It's a large barrier to entry to this. until someone does it and it becomes obvious that you got to just accept Bitcoin, because Bitcoiners, not crypto people, are the ones who are really going to be passionate and willing to spend their hard-earned Bitcoin on something high quality. I just don't see that same passion for building a circular economy in any other community.
Let's take a break for a moment and appreciate the beauty that Coin Vigilante has made with the Bitcoin watches. Those watches are the most amazing, the most elegant way of showing that you are a true Bitcoiner. And Coin Vigilante just dropped a completely new and amazing Genesis edition of their watch collections. You have the date of the first ever mined Bitcoin block in there, and of course also the block height and which epoch we are currently in. I love the level of detail they put in this masterpiece. Make sure to check out those amazing Coin Vigilante timepieces down in the descriptions. I love those watches so much. And now, if you have Bitcoin, I really do hope that you don't have it on exchange. But if you do have it on exchange, I have two ways for you to deal with that. The first way is you put it on a hardware wallet. That's the entry for you to get into the self-custody game. I recommend BitBox, Bitcoin only edition, for that. It's a super simple and secure way. And if you check out the link in the description, you even get 5% off if you use the code Robin. And the second way is the Bitcoin Way. The Bitcoin Way is your all-in partner in terms of how to get the most out of your sovereignty. They will personalize for you a self-custody setup that is perfect for your individual situation. They will show you how you can secure your own devices. Securing your Bitcoin is not enough. You also have to keep all your devices secure. One topic that is overlooked often is the inheritance plan. What happens with your Bitcoin once you are no longer here? Do you have a plan for that in place already? And last but not least, if you're in the jurisdictions where you don't feel safe, it's better to get a plan B. For all that, head over to thebitcoinway.com/Robin to get a 30-minute free call. And just a quick side note, I will be for the first time ever speaking at the Bitcoin Prague event in June. It will be absolutely legendary, and I'm really looking forward to seeing all of you there. You can get your ticket in the link down in the description of Bitcoin Prague, and very important, use code Robin to get 10% off your ticket. I'm really looking forward seeing you there.
Yeah, very true. Actually, the watch brand that I partnered up with, they did Bitcoin only, then they ventured into crypto also, and they quickly reversed. They went back to Bitcoin only. It's super interesting to see that, because you're like, Bitcoin is the valuable thing from a monetary standpoint. And then as a logical progression of that, Bitcoiners are the valuable customers that you want. And I, as a Bitcoiner, I usually only want to spend my Bitcoin on people that I know will keep the Bitcoin. So if he's just feared and he's just accepting Bitcoin, like I wouldn't spend my Bitcoin on a Tesla. Like that was possible previously, I think in like 4 years ago, something like that. Not because I don't like Tesla, but just because I don't like the idea of just using Bitcoin as that. Maybe if I'm only having Bitcoin and I don't want to spend my fiat, then I see it differently. But there is a better feeling if I know he's a Bitcoiner. For example, there's a local meetup where I go each month, or like it's each month. I'm not going each month there, but you can pay with Bitcoin. And he's a real Bitcoiner. He's hardcore, and I like what he's doing. And there I just always spend Satoshis. Like I always spend my Bitcoin there. And it's a good feeling. Like, oh, like it's circular economy. I know he will not sell it. Like he's a Bitcoiner. And that's another aspect maybe to that, where if you're a real Bitcoiner and you can communicate that, Bitcoiners are more likely to give you Bitcoin, because they know
it's a circular economy, and you're not just like making another another revenue stream, and then like just dump it onto the market after you got the product, which I think Bitcoiners are liking that. I think that's an aspect of that.
Yeah, and I think there are tools, Strike specifically, that's allowing you to spend dollars and someone receive it as Bitcoin or whatever currency they value, and that will absolutely continue. But the two things you said there are just like great feedback, because I'm happy to hear that my intuition and personal experience is not just limited to me. I think I know the watch brand you're talking about, and I remember giving them shit for that interim period, and it's great to hear that they've gone back to Bitcoin only, and that the market is demanding that, because I mean, that's what I've felt, and I'm glad I'm just not the only one, because I think that is a greater I think that really is a greater trend. The other thing is, yeah, you're much more likely to spend your Bitcoin with someone who appreciates it, because you're like, hey, I'm giving you this thing that was very, like, it took a lot for me to get this, and I know where, and especially considering I know where it's going. I'm telling you that I massively appreciate you by spending this Bitcoin on you, because I could just give you crap money. I could give you dollars, I could give you euros, but I'm giving you Bitcoin, and I want you to appreciate this. And if you don't, what's the point of me giving you Bitcoin? It's like giving someone a gift that they don't really care about. It doesn't feel great. So I think that's exactly nail on the head, is you want companies that appreciate it, that either hold it, or it's like, hey, we're trying to hold maybe 10%, but we're investing everything else back into our business to continue making better products. But as a Bitcoiner, when you spend your Bitcoin, or even to a lesser degree, but when you just spend your money on a company that you value, you're voting for that company to exist and continue making their product in the future. And I think that's a power that Bitcoiners are just really beginning to feel. I mean, think of how many Bitcoiners there were a decade ago. Now, every single one of those, has maybe 100x purchasing power. And that number just continues growing every single day. The number of Bitcoiners that exist and the number of Bitcoiners who have had their purchasing power increased to a massive degree. So I keep harping on this, but I really think Bitcoiners as a growing consumer base is something to watch over the next little bit. And once we see one company really make a name for themselves by doing this, I think there's going to be a ton to follow.
Do you give discounts for Bitcoin, or like premiums for fiat payments?
So I'm kind of in the middle of thinking about this. In talking to in the wine world, you're selling a premium product, and I think with premium products, you don't really want to be in the discount world, because it devalues your product. Why would I buy it now when I can buy it cheaper in the future? Where wine is getting more valuable over time. So discounts aren't really something that I'm necessarily looking to do. However, I have done them in the past. And the way I see treating Bitcoiners is more just making sure that they have rights to, or they have access to maybe exclusive things with Bitcoin. I have some packages that and some wines available that are just for Bitcoiners, and also just making sure they have not that other people don't get great customer service from me, but really trying to go the extra mile for Bitcoiners, because I know what they gave me, and I'm not taking that lightly. And more than anyone, especially want them to be repeat customers. So I think that you may see that for future businesses, because I think when you're just getting into Bitcoin, like this company, West Major, is a Western wear company in Phoenix that I just went and visited to get onto a Bitcoin standard. And my friend who is on this venture with me to get these businesses onboarded to Bitcoin bought a bunch of shirts from West Major in Bitcoin when Bitcoin was like 100 to 105K. And, he's hardcore Bitcoiner telling this guy that is curious about Bitcoin, new to it, that he should just hold this for a long time, don't sell it. Meanwhile, the owner is like, I need money to buy the next round of shirts, to sell shirts, so I can make more money to buy the next round of shirts, and is on that hamster wheel. And going down to talk to him, Bitcoin had dropped down to 85. So let's just say 15% drop. And he's sitting there like watching his Bitcoin devalue. And it's hard for him because he's like, I was told to sell this, or I was told to keep this, but I kind of want to buy shirts, and shirts I know I can sell and make money. Whereas this, I'm losing money in the short term and I have to make decisions right now. And so it's a harder thing to get companies that are profitable, but in the early stages, to really hold Bitcoin. And therefore, it's like, if you expect them to give you a discount for spending Bitcoin, I think it's a little bit harder of a proposition, because these businesses that are not fully on board with Bitcoin and are just kind of dipping their toes and want to, are curious. Maybe they see the future purchasing power increase in the future. They dive deeper. They learn about it. They see the Bitcoiners' enthusiasm and they're fully into it. But expecting a discount for Bitcoin, I think, is just beyond our skis as Bitcoiners. Once we show how powerful we are, once we continue to show Bitcoin as a powerful leverage into the future, I think you get that power. Like, there's more companies that really want to have your Bitcoin versus getting paid in fiat. But I think we're just a little too early to, as Bitcoiners, totally expect that. Whereas I've given discounts for Bitcoiners in the past, and it's worked well. But I'm also a hardcore Bitcoiner who says 10% discount, I don't care. This is going to be worth 10x in a few years, and if I can just hold it, I'm great. It's just a bigger lift for the companies that are new to it, and depending on what you're selling, it's not quite the right fit. Whereas I think it is going to become the norm to give a discount for Bitcoin in the future.
Yeah, I mean, there's some famous examples. Ben from BTC Sessions was recently on the podcast, said he charges a 15% premium if a partner wants to pay in fiat. So that's, you can save premium in fiat or discount in Bitcoin. It ends up being the same thing. Bitcoin Prague, for example, the conference gives a 5% discount if you pay in Bitcoin, on top of the 10% discount if you like use a code. So there's things like that, and I do think it's great from a perspective, like, hey, like I know this Bitcoin thing is more valuable, so I'll give you a 5% discount if you give me the valuable thing, because I might, like, if I have a business, okay, let's make an example with my business. I get paid in fiat and in Bitcoin, and those Bitcoin I get directly in my self-custody wallet. Like, there's one step in between for privacy and stuff like that, but it's basically directly into Bitcoin. If I get it in fiat, I have to put that fiat on the exchange. The exchange gets a cut. Then from that, I have to transfer it to my wallet. There's like fees involved with that. So it ends up costing me more if some fiat. So in some sense, if you're on a Bitcoin standard, it probably makes sense to say Bitcoin is a default, and I'm charging a premium if you want to pay me in fiat. But I understand if you have customers, it might be a weird thing of saying like, hey, this is the price. If you pay me in the thing that you always used to pay me, I'm charging a premium. I think it's a bad marketing thing, which you can do as a Bitcoin conference probably, and maybe as Ben of BTC Sessions, you can definitely do it. But probably if you want to sell wine or other businesses,
so I could probably do it as well. And it's kind of the difference I'm making here is, if we're trying to onboard the next wave of businesses onto accepting Bitcoin, and eventually becoming part of our mission, but at least putting their foot in the door, I don't think that expecting Bitcoin discounts is really there, because they see Bitcoin as volatile, risky, and maybe are curious about it and are, expect the upside and will eventually be part of the mission, but they have expenses and probably not much as far as savings go. This is the difference between like the S&P 500 companies with tons of dollars on their balance sheet versus the company that's just trying to grow and expand and invest everything back into it. And I think that like I'm fully into Bitcoin. Ben is fully into Bitcoin. BTC Prague, fully into Bitcoin. You're selling to Bitcoiners. And it's that extra, like, we're so into Bitcoin that we don't want your dollars. Like, that is a great selling point once you're fully in. But I think it's unrealistic for the next wave of businesses that we're trying to onboard to Bitcoin to be there. But I think everyone will be. I mean, that's the idea of good money drives out bad. Eventually, we're not going to want dollars. But most people are not there yet. Most people and most businesses are just like, look, if you pay us, we're happy. And I think we onboard that next bit of Bitcoiners by just showing our support for strong businesses that make good products, and hopefully a small amount of paying with Bitcoin as a bit of like a token gesture that maybe, I mean, this is kind of like the ironic part is like, maybe they haven't figured out how to totally transfer their Bitcoin to dollars yet. Or maybe it's just like that extra thing that they kind of forget to do, or it's just a few sales. They eventually, like, they kind of, you know, it's over there. They're not looking at it every day. In a few years, they come back and they're like, oh my God, this Bitcoin thing is crazy. I'm glad I was accepting that. And it's a positive feedback loop to accepting it more, to being louder, to marketing towards more Bitcoiners, to Bitcoiners saying, yeah, fuck yeah, we're into this. And I think it's kind of just, yeah, as I said, it starts this positive feedback loop of making high quality goods for Bitcoiners, because that's what Bitcoiners want. And ultimately, if we want to live on the Bitcoin standard, we need companies to produce things for us and allow us to use Bitcoin.
Absolutely. We need more circular economy. We need more spending in Bitcoin. We need more Bitcoin acceptance.
So what? Okay. We say this. So, I'm just like, let's get to the heart of this issue. We say we need, yeah, I think this is going to happen, organically, but like, what is it that's stopping? I'm trying to like figure out what is it that's stopping businesses. I think it's a lot of education about Bitcoin, but like, what is it that's stopping Bitcoiners from doing that? Is it, I just don't know if you're going to hold on to it. Is it, it's going to go up 10x in the next year. I don't know if I really want to spend my Bitcoin. Is it just taxes? Is it not being comfortable using something like Strike? Is it lack of opportunity? It's kind of like, we say we need it, but like, what's stopping us?
I was recently with Jeff Booth on Ben's Friday live stream, and it was actually a topic, and there were like, I saw the chat next to it, and there was a wild discussion on that. I think people and Bitcoiners have one stupid narrative. They're saying like, oh, why would I sell my Bitcoin if it's so much worth in the future? And I'm always saying, spending it is not selling it. You have 100% of your income. And if you put and you use from that 100% income, like, I don't know, like 70% for expenses, you have 30% left. It doesn't matter what comes in and what comes out. If you determine everything in Bitcoin, you're saving 30%. You're spending 30% of your Bitcoin and 70% of your Bitcoin you are saving. If you are now spending your fiat and saving 70% in Bitcoin, it's the same reality. You're saving 70% in Bitcoin. It does not make a difference if you are spending in Bitcoin or in euros. If for example, if I had the chance to pay my landlord in Bitcoin, I would do it. To get on this full Bitcoin circular economy, because I would have to spend that rent anyways. It does not make a difference if I spend it in euros or in Bitcoin. If I have 100% all my reserves in Bitcoin, why does it matter in what form I pay it? It's anyways money going out of my account.
So I think the difference is whether you have a buffer to survive any volatility. So you can pay, like, if you have a fiat buffer between the two, I think it's the only counterpoint to what I would say with you. But I mean, realistically, yeah, you are in a better position if you are all in Bitcoin, because every bit goes up over time. I mean, from a long-term perspective, but short-term, yeah, it can cost you a little bit more if you're a forced spender on a down day. But one thing you said there is like paying your landlord in Bitcoin. And I think what you're not saying is that you would probably have a better relationship and experience with that landlord if you could pay him in Bitcoin, and they would probably give you a better service in return, both because, maybe they appreciate it, like we're talking about, but maybe you're just giving them more financial leeway. And when they got to come fix your refrigerator, they're not like super destroyed. I mean, they shouldn't be, but like, it's not a huge expense for them because they've been saving in Bitcoin. And it's something like with my friends, like I'm always trying to pay my friends back, or if they help me work or something in Bitcoin, because I want my friends to succeed. I want the people around me to succeed. I live in a small town and want my small town to succeed. And that's like, sure, there's a bit of altruism in that, but ultimately it can be viewed as entirely selfish. I don't want to be around a bunch of losers. I don't want to be around a bunch of people that are destroyed by the fiat financial system. I want to be around a bunch of people who are able to pursue their dream and do what they're on this world to do. And if we could support those people, I think it drives our own personal spot into a better place. It's the voting with your money for the companies that produce the things you want. And it's the people around you not suffering so they can produce things, give back to society, and increase it. And I think it's maybe a little bit harder to see if you're in a city, because there's so many people, you feel a little bit more powerless to influence the world around you. But you still have that power. It's maybe just a bit, I don't know, maybe diluted. Maybe it's just harder to see because there is so much other stuff around. But you as a Bitcoiner, whether it's education, just giving that person a little bit of Bitcoin, I think you have the power to influence the world around you.
Capital gains taxes, I think, might be a valid point.
An important tool.
Capital gains tax might be a valid point of like, okay, maybe, but even there, maybe I'm too much on a Bitcoin standard already, but like spending a Bitcoin is, I think, an important thing to do long term. One thing before we close up, I want to mention, or like I want to get touch in with you. How do you look at businesses that are on a Bitcoin standard that now have to take the decision? Are we using the Bitcoin stack? And it actually comes a little bit in that discussion, to expand our business, or is it a better strategy to hold on to the Bitcoin? Like, my question is like, what does change in a business once it has Bitcoin as a hurdle rate? Because Bitcoin in itself grows quite good every year, and you have to find an investment that's good enough to outperform and be better long term than just holding on to those Bitcoin.
Totally. It really reprices what you're trying to do with your business and makes you look at everything from a slightly different perspective. You really have to do something that is almost, if it's risky, it's got to be really high returns. And if it's not that risky, it's still got to be pretty high returns to beat Bitcoin. So there's a couple of ways I think about it. One is what Jack Mallers talks about a lot, is the 44%, numbers changes every day, but compound annual growth rate of Bitcoin over the last 10 years. The compound annual growth rate over the last 4 years today is the lowest Bitcoin's ever been, which is 10%. And I mean, I'm constantly bullish Bitcoin, so it's hard for me to think that 10% number is something that I can use going forward. So I err towards wanting to hold as much Bitcoin as possible. The other thing is I've started to think about spending windows in 4-year cycles, which I think is hard for a lot of businesses. But as a winery, I have such a low time preference and turnover already that it's maybe a bit easier because I'm aging wine for 2 years generally before I sell it. But the way I think about that is I'm almost like just kind of continue on the path as much as I can, maybe small investments, small tweaks in different ways, but like really thinking about okay, if the 4-year cycle continues, and it's easier to say this as the potential 4th year is this year in Bitcoin, but I look at it for the next year going forward, assuming the 4th year or the 4-year cycle is, I can spend money on my business and buy all the things that I'm probably going to need over the next 4 years and still feel pretty comfortable outperforming Bitcoin, or at least knowing that like I offset that outperformance as much as possible. If the 4-year cycle doesn't continue, I mean, I guess it could change, but ultimately, I think most people think that if the 4-year cycle doesn't continue, then it's pretty aggressive to the upside. And then, like, as long as I held Bitcoin, I'm happy. I mean, the goal is always hold as much as possible, but as running a business, you do have expenses. So if you can time it correctly in a 4-year cycle, or you can just view the calculations of risk return given Bitcoin's history, I think that those two things put you in a better spot to succeed. That said, like, no one can predict Bitcoin, and you're taking a risk every time you sell Bitcoin. So you better be pretty sure. My like cost of production every year producing wine, luckily, outperforms Bitcoin, or it'd be kind of hard for me to really go through the process of buying a ton of grapes and holding them for 2 years. So I can't really produce cheap wine, or it doesn't make sense on a Bitcoin standard. And I think a lot of businesses are going to continue seeing that they need to increase the value of their product. And when you do that, you have to continuously search for people who can afford and increasingly afford yours. So you want people who are on the same standard as you. But yeah, I've got a lot of business improvements that I'd like to do this fall-ish, going forward. And I don't really see myself having a great opportunity to do that. Just base case 4-year cycle continues for another 4 years. So I'm thinking hard about what is actually worthwhile to spend some Bitcoin on and improve my business, and hopefully have cash flow to buy the bottom and buy the continuous next cycle if there is one. And just kind of relieve some spending pressure right now, because I have been so focused on just get as much Bitcoin as possible.
That's the life mission. Get as many, stack as many as possible. We have one question that I ask each and every one of my guests, and the question is, I think last time when we recorded, it wasn't in there. I started the routine later. What can we learn from you besides Bitcoin?
I love just kind of small business marketing. Just thinking about that, and that's kind of what's got me going in Bitcoin and winemaking, is just like thinking about like individual incentives. So I don't know. I find a lot of people are much more interested in starting a big entrepreneurial venture, but I think there are, at least in Bitcoin, or the people that go on podcasts are, but I think there's a lot of people looking at starting a mom and pop store. And I think that with more expensive cost of capital, I think that'll come back, as Bitcoin has a decentralizing nature to counter Fiat's centralizing nature. And that's something I'm really passionate about, is mom and pop businesses and the incentives you have there, because it's just a completely different business than anything your in tech investments that we continuously hear about.
Really cool. Yeah, absolutely. We have an routine in the podcast where the previous guest is asking a question for the next guest without knowing who the next guest actually is. And your question from a previous guest is, what is the Bitcoin Renaissance mean to you?
I think it's this continued drive to produce higher quality products, because people can afford it and you can't really afford not to. Because the only way you can afford Fiat's a race to the bottom, and thus we've seen businesses and products race to the bottom. And I think that bottom's been found. And if you're continuously still racing towards it, I think you're going to lose. So the winners of the future are the people that are making higher quality products for people who are embracing the Bitcoin standard. And I think that kind of death of consumerism and appreciation of what you have just leads to a society with much more soul.
I do agree a lot. Really cool. Thank you so much, Ben, for being on. Before I let you go, where can people find you, ask you questions, maybe also find the wine?
Yeah. So I'm on Nostr a lot these days, and you can find me at Ben Justman. There's probably some other accounts that are me, but you just DM me if you're ever curious. On Twitter at Ben Justman as well as at Peony Lane Wine, Peony. And you can order wine all over the United States on peonylanewine.com or using Nostr and Cashew at Shopster. So that's a cool new implementation that I'm excited to see get going.
Really cool. I love that. Yeah, it's great to see also those Bitcoin businesses that have been on the podcast for now a year also develop and grow. Let's see where we both are in 10 years. Thank you so much, Ben, for being on the show. Also, thank you so much for everyone that is watching and listening for joining us today. As always, I'll be back tomorrow with another episode. Bye bye.